Hare Krishna, everybody. Welcome to the 17th chapter of our Bhagavad Gita exploration. We'll start with some kirtan, led by Bhakti Kelly. Okay.
Musicians audio on. So come into your comfortable seat. And sit tall. Let go of any tension being held in your physical form that you're able to release. Soften the features of your face. Relax your shoulders. Soften your belly. Open and close your mouth a few times. Release your jaw. Let's take a clearing breath to arrive here together as best we can. Inhale through your nose, fill up. Open your mouth, exhale, let it go. Opening prayers, this honoring of all of our teachers, the acharyas who have walked this path before us, bestowing the light of knowledge upon us, removing the darkness of ignorance. We honor all spiritual teachers of all spiritual paths, of all spiritual ages. All are welcome here. Take a deep breath in. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama turn your musician's audio on or off.
Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes, the torch lamp of knowledge. For my respectful obeisances unto him. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakti Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai. Great to be with all of you again. So we're beginning the 17th chapter, so second last class for Bhagavad Gita. And we'll start with any reflections or comments, anything that stood out from the 16th chapter, Deva Asuras and Padvibhag Yoga, the divine and demoniac natures. There were some nice comments in the WhatsApp thread. Let's get just a little bit to start us off, get us back in the flow. Anything that stood out?
Hi.
Yeah, go ahead, Shannon.
So I really liked what kept resonating with me were how much our choices matter, and we can act accordingly to become elevated. And I see that regularly in my daily life where, you know, I look at things very much differently than I did maybe a year and a half ago. And I'm looking always to kind of see how I could have elevated myself in different situations. And I liked also that these, you know, the don'ts that don't do this sort of context is to provide guardrails as a means of support. And they're meant to be used with compassion for yourself. And I loved how that just was presented and explained.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely. That's my sense of the chapter too. Is that Krishna really cares about us, and that's why he's saying the tough things, but he's saying it in a way to protect us, and he's also saying it, like you said, it's never a point at which there's no redemption. You know, even when he gets to like the darkest part of the chapter is like, you know, somebody who's in this mentality, I cast them into a state of forgetfulness. His immediate follow-up is that don't degrade yourself, and this is how you can elevate yourself. In other words, it's not like a linear black and white thing. It's like, oh, these are good people, these are bad people. Everyone's constantly in the process of becoming something. You know, we're always active. Our present moment is always defining our future experiences. And that's kind of scary, but it's also extremely empowering. It's extremely empowering because we can always have a better experience. We can have our choices continue to matter, and we can pull ourselves out with help. We can pull ourselves out of any difficult situation. Thank you. Anything else before we go into chapter 17? Okay. So chapter 17 is in Sanskrit called Shraddha Trivibhaga Yoga, the yoga of the three divisions of faith. And for those who've been paying attention, when you hear there's three different kinds of something, you'll probably think of what? The gunas, meaning the modes of nature. Yeah. So there's going to be a little more about the modes of nature. And Shraddha, which is translated as faith, but is actually a very interesting word. Shraddha literally means where you put your heart in Sanskrit. That's what's translated as faith. So we'll get to that. Faith means where you put your heart. So Arjuna begins the chapter by asking, "Oh Krishna, what is the situation of those who don't follow the principles of scripture but worship according to their own imagination? Are they in goodness, in passion, or in ignorance?" And so the 16th chapter ended with Krishna saying, because it's important to know what to do and what not to do, you should make a study of and know spiritual knowledge. You should know what scripture has to say. You should know what the spiritual instructions are for people in different situations, because that's transcendental. And so Arjuna says, okay, what if they don't follow that? What if someone's not interested in that, or they don't know about it? are they in this mode or that mode or another mode? And Krishna answers in text 2. And this kind of sets the tone for the whole chapter. So I'll share the screen here. Here we go. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Trividha Bhavati Shraddha Dehinang Sa Svabhavaja Sattaki Rajasi Chaiva Tamasi Cheti Tang Shrunu. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, according to the modes of nature acquired by the embodied soul, one's faith can be of 3 kinds, in goodness, in passion, or in ignorance. Now hear about this. So basically he's saying it depends. It depends on the qualities one has obtained, what one has been in touch with, what one's association or conditioning is. And the next verse he says, Arjuna, according to one's existence under the various modes of nature, one evolves a particular kind of faith. The living being is said to be of a particular faith according to the modes he has acquired. And in the Sanskrit to this verse, you have the term shrotamaya, which means made of faith, full of faith. The living entity is made of their convictions. They're made of what they believe in. In other words, Krishna is saying, like, okay, if somebody doesn't follow what spiritual guidance has to offer around what they can do with their life, they'll follow something. There's never a vacuum. There's never like not having conviction about something, not being attracted to something. They're always attracted one way or another. And if they're not attracted to spiritual guidings, which are above the modes of nature, then they'll have some kind of cultural or karmic or, like some different affiliation with some ideas. And they're actually made of that. We're actually shraddhamaya. We're made of our faith. We're made of like where we put our heart. And this is what defines cultures. This is what defines family units. This is what defines languages and historical periods and countries and how things are done, is the different combination of modes of nature that people are attracted to. And when you have exposure to something, then you think that's normal. And when you see the opposite, you think that's really weird. And it turns out a lot of that is really arbitrary. I had a really nice conversation with a devotee about recently about public displays of affection, right? Because it's a cultural thing, right? Like, is that something that devotees do? Is that like, how does that work? And then I expressed, it's not really a big part of the devotee scene, because the idea is that if I make my own body or the other bodies of someone else kind of like the center of attention, it takes away from the spiritual vibration. It takes away from people's ability to focus on Krishna. So it's generally seen as a distraction. However, there's a lot of variety because it's a cultural thing, really big time among human beings. Like if you go to places like, I don't know, Britain or Germany or East Asia, it's very not a thing publicly. If you go to anywhere in the South American continent, Central America, it's very much a thing. And so for somebody who spends their life in one place, what they see is they consider normal. They see the opposite, they consider that strange. One of the values of traveling is that you get to realize that a lot of this is kind of depending on the modes of nature. It varies. So Krishna is saying everybody has their sense of what normal and right is. And without the anchor, without the like objective guidepost of spiritual truth, people just kind of make it up for themselves according to time and place and circumstance and culture and what their family did, and kind of like what their tastes are. And that's where their faith is. And so faith isn't just a matter of spiritual or religious belief. It's also a matter of what we consider to be important. Somebody may have faith in public displays of affection. Somebody may have faith in like not doing that. Faith, quote unquote, is like that's where their heart is. That's what they consider normal. And this applies to basically everything, which is why it's important to have spiritual context, spiritual guidance, because otherwise we really just default to whatever our karma is. And we consider that normal. And we consider that progressive. And it may be or it may not be. And generally it's some mixture thereof. And it's kind of in the modes of nature. So Krishna is going to talk about that. So he talks about different kinds of spiritual or pseudo-spiritual practices. He says, people in the mode of goodness worship the demigods. Those in the mode of passion worship the demons. And those in the mode of ignorance worship ghosts and spirits. And then he talks about different activities in the modes of nature. He says, those who undergo severe austerities and penances not recommended in scriptures, perform them out of pride and egoism, who are impelled by lust and attachment, and who are foolish, and who torture the material elements of the body, as well as the supersoul dwelling within, are to be known as demons. In other words, this is in the mode of ignorance, like to unnecessarily cause suffering even to your own body. It's considered a lower mode of nature. Like if you fast to the point of extremity, if like you deny yourself physical comforts, past the point, that becomes like, if it's done in the wrong mode and it's done out of attachment and pride, and if it causes distress to your body, it's actually considered to be in tamas. It's considered to be in the mode of ignorance. And then he says, even the food people eat and the kind of sacrifices they make and their austerities and charity are divided according to the modes of nature. So that's basically what we're going to hear about for the rest of the chapter: food and forms of activities of sacrifice and austerities and charity, and how they vary. So he says in verse 8, I'll share the screen. These are 3 verses about food, really practical, because everyone eats every day. So food's in the mode of goodness. Ayu saptabala rugya sukhapriti vivartana rasyas niktastara hrudya ahara sattaka priyaha. Foods dear to those in the mode of goodness increase the duration of life. Right? So food that's actually good for your health is in the mode of goodness. They purify one's existence. They give strength, health, happiness, and satisfaction. Such foods are juicy, fatty, wholesome, and pleasing to the heart. Yeah.
I love that.
Foods that are
pleasing to the heart.
Pleasing to the heart, yeah. Foods that are too bitter, too sour, salty, hot, pungent, dry, and burning are dear to those in the mode of passion. Such foods cause distress, misery, and disease. So you can imagine, like, these things can cause like ulcers, digestive problems, too salty, too bold, too much flavor. Like one of the kind of patterns we've seen with the mode of passion rather, is that it seems like a really good idea at the time. And so kind of like a lot of processed food, it tends to be very in the mode of rajas, passion, because it's kind of like very sweet up front, like it's too sweet, or really salty, lots of flavor, super bold, really spicy, and it's memorable and you kind of like it. MSG will do that and different things like that, and you pay for it later. It's like you enjoy up front and you pay for it later is kind of a mode of passion thing. And then you have mode of ignorance. Food prepared more than 3 hours before being eaten. In other words, when food becomes stale or starts to go, food that is tasteless, decomposed, and putrid, food consisting of remnants and untouchable things is dear to those in the mode of darkness. Srila Prabhupada has a nice purport here about food for those who want to know more about how to consider food in the modes of nature. The kind of like more details about food are found in summary in this purport, 1710, and they're taken from other places like the Ayurvedic texts. So for example, like eating meat is actually a tamasic thing. It's eating like dead flesh, basically, yeah, like flesh in the sense of like what we consider flesh of like a fleshy body, not just like, you could say the flesh of a pumpkin or something. That has a different effect on the body and mind. It's more of a degrading effect, and that's not so much dealt with in detail in Bhagavad Gita. It's summarized here, and you can refer to the purport, and other places like the Ayurvedic texts talk about more details. But in summary, basically, we're as devotees trying to follow a sattvic diet, more foods in the mode of goodness, and they're good for your health. That's one of the symptoms of them, and they're pleasing to the heart. One develops a taste for them. I remember when I started decreasing my meat intake, I started to develop a taste for fruits and vegetables and vegetarian foods and whole grains and legumes that I didn't have before. Your tastes actually change. And that's, again, a kind of faith. It's where you put your heart. It's like people like really love that kind of sandwich or this kind of thing. It's actually by association. So you can develop a taste for foods in the mode of goodness as much as you can develop a taste for foods in lower modes. So continuing on. Oops. 1 second. So from verse 11 on, Krishna talks about the principles of sacrifice. In verse 11, he says, of sacrifices, the sacrifice performed according to the directions of Scripture, as a matter of duty, by those who desire no reward, is of the nature of goodness. So making a sacrifice because it's something that's been described that you should do, not making it up for yourself, not doing it because you want to get something back, some reward. This is a mode of goodness. But verse 12, the sacrifice performed for some material benefit or for the sake of pride is in the mode of passion. Any sacrifice performed without regard for the directions of Scripture, without distribution of prasadam, without spiritual food, without chanting of hymns and remuneration to the priests, and without faith is considered to be in the mode of ignorance. So if you are completely neglectful of all spiritual guidance, if you don't distribute spiritual food, this is how valuable distribution of spiritualized food is. Distributing food has been considered a very, very important part of spiritual culture in this tradition. So one thing we know about Hare Krishna is very, very fond of distributing delicious food. In fact, the Hare Krishna movement is known colloquially as the kitchen religion in many places. One of our major contributions culturally is the Food for Life program around the world, free vegetarian food, vegan food. There's gigantic amounts of food, all offered to Krishna, spiritual food distributed around the world. The largest is located in India, but in really basically every country in the world at this point. And there are cafes and restaurants, and those are very much part of the culture of Krishna consciousness. Because people can make spiritual advancement by doing nothing more than eating spiritualized food, and it's really easy to do. Yeah. And continuing, Krishna talks about austerity. So austerity means like taking on some temporary suffering for a higher purpose. So in verse 14, Krishna talks about austerities of the body, and then he talks about austerities of speech, and then austerities of the mind. So austerities can take place in any of these three ways. So things you could do with your body that are actually bona fide austerities. He says in verse 14, worshiping the Lord. Like, for example, bowing down. In the Sanskrit, the word is pujana. Pujana means puja, worship, which includes the usage of your body to offer items, and also the bowing down process, which we've heard about in other parts of Bhagavad Gita. We can see this is very prominent among Muslims and other traditions. It's like you actually physically put your body down. This is a way of purifying the body, actually, according to Krishna here. It's an austerity of the body, because doing something with your body for service, spiritual service, means your body becomes spiritualized. So when you use your body to walk to a place of worship, or you turn your home into a place of worship, and you have like some simple offering you make to your deity, and you bow down, you fold your hands. This is a very common thing in spiritual cultures, folding the hands. It's like physically putting my humility and service mode into practice, instead of just being like, with your words. That's good. That's austerity of speech. You can also just like bow your head, fold your hands, put your head on the ground if you want to. It's a kind of austerity. So worshiping the Lord, worshiping the brahmanas, spiritual people. Actually serving spiritual people with your body is a bona fide austerity. Serving the guru, the spiritual master, teachers, superiors like the father and mother, just showing respect to people who have helped you with your body, folding hands, showing them dignity, giving them dignity, showing them respect. This is a very purifying thing. Cleanliness, I talked about this in other places. If you go out of your way to be clean, it takes some work. I don't have to work to be unclean in the morning. It just happens. Sleeping all night.
You get itchy.
Get itchy. Breath smells. Got to take a shower. I have to work. I don't have to work for that. You have to work to get clean again. And that work is actually uplifting. It's in the mode of goodness. It's a kind of austerity. So cleanliness gives us simplicity. Simplicity takes some work. Ever try decluttering, getting rid of unnecessary items, living a simple life, having a simple mind? Doing these things actually is a kind of bona fide, approved austerity. A celibacy is a kind of austerity, and like not being indulgent with the sexual drive. The simplest form of celibacy, according to Scripture, is monogamy. That's actually a kind of celibacy. According to Scripture, being married and only having a sexual relationship with your partner is also celibacy. It's not that celibacy is just like complete abstinence. That's a kind of celibacy. But the Scripture on celibacy I've actually looked at. It's very interesting. The baseline is you're monogamous. And that's really good for the body and mind, actually. It's a kind of austerity, puts you in sattva, puts you in the mode of goodness. The last item he gives here is non-violence. Non-violence is good for you. As much as you may want to punch your boss or that person who cuts you off in traffic, road rage is not so good. It's passion and really ignorance. So refraining from violence is good. Austerities of speech.
Someone have a question?
Possibly. I'm going to read the next two verses, then I'll pause. Austerities of speech. He lists, boy, I've given like talks on just one of these verses. Like they're each so deep. He says the austerity of speech consists in speaking words that are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, not agitating to others, and also regularly reciting Vedic literature, spiritual literature. So let's look at these. Speaking the truth is a kind of austerity, right? It takes a little work to speak the truth. It's really easy to cut corners with this. But if you speak the truth, it's really purifying for you and for others who hear it. Speaking words that are pleasing. This is actually interesting because sometimes the truth is not pleasing. You have to find a way to present the truth in a way that it is pleasing. But also going out of your way to speak in such a way that doesn't cause distress to others. Try to please them with your words. Beneficial. I'm not just giving them ear candy. I'm trying to uplift them. I'm speaking the truth for benefit of others. I'm speaking to benefit others, not to agitate them, right? So like sarcasm, putting people down, insults. If it's done out of love, joking words, that's one thing, but intentionally trying to agitate the minds of others is the opposite of this. And regularly reciting spiritual literature, sharing spiritual literature, like we're all doing right now. This is very much an austerity. Purifies your mouth and ears. And this is very uplifting. And Kelly, yes, you have something?
What if speaking your truth, you touched on this, I think, a little bit, but what if speaking your truth or truthfully is not pleasing to someone else?
If speaking truth is not pleasing to someone else, you should first establish what your relationship with that person is. Are you their teacher? Are you in a position where can they receive what you have to say?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, if they're really senior to you, you may not be the person to speak truth to them. Maybe get somebody on their level to speak truth to them.
Mm-hmm.
Ever try teaching your parents a lesson? It's not really easy. It's not so easy to get a lesson from somebody whose diapers you changed once upon a time.
They changed ours.
Yeah, when they changed our diapers, it's not so easy to like. So it's maybe get somebody their own age to tell them. It's like the context is one thing. And another thing I'll mention is that if it's your duty to speak to somebody, like if they've signed up on the dotted line, they need you to speak truth, like a teacher, a guru, or if you're in a position of authority, it's not easy. The answer to that question is it's not easy. Sometimes you have to speak in a way that will help them in the long run, and they may not like it in the short term, which is why it's difficult to take those responsibilities, and why, as Christian mentions earlier, you should show respect to those who do.
Mm-hmm.
And do a legit job of it, because if they're trying to serve you in that way, they're putting themselves in the line of fire. Because when you have to speak to somebody, give them the truth in a way that they'll need that truth to uplift themselves, but it's not palatable at first because it can't be, because it's attacking their ego or whatever. They could take it the wrong way. You take a risk.
Right.
You actually take a risk. It's actually a lot easier to bite your tongue and be like, not my problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in some cases that may be the right thing to do because it isn't your problem or it isn't your responsibility to say something.
Mm-hmm. So could it also be like,
but it's hard to actually take the stand.
if it is your responsibility to say it kindly or like in a compassionate way, even so that's like more pleasing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to try. The harder you try, the more you can have the intersection of things that are truthful, beneficial, and pleasing. Yeah. So continuing, let's see, we're on the next verse now. And then I'll pause for comments and questions. Austerities of the mind. Krishna says one of the austerities of the mind is satisfaction. Very interesting. You can practice satisfaction. It's an austerity. Just like you can practice showing respect to others or appreciating your elders or celibacy or simplicity, you can practice satisfaction and it purifies the mind. It's a very interesting thing because we live in an age where we're taught to be dissatisfied. And we're taught to be dissatisfied because that makes it really easy to sell things to us. People who are satisfied make terrible customers. They're not good for people in the mode of passion or just trying to make money. Because when you're satisfied, you don't need to buy a bunch of stuff you don't really need because you know you don't need it because you're already happy. And if you want happiness, then this is what it's all about. Start with practicing satisfaction. Prabhupada talks about this in the purport. If you want to learn more about how to be satisfied, read this purport, chapter 17, verse 16. Other practices for austerities for purifying the mind: simplicity, gravity. Gravity means like not speaking too much, being sober, not like whimsical. There's a time and a place for joking. It's like a very advisable thing to like not always be serious. But maunam, gravity, sobriety is very good for the mind because it lets you get past surface level, lets you think deep thoughts. If you're always joking, if you're always like, there's always like levity, you can never really appreciate your situation or the situation of the world. You can never feel deeply. And it's important to feel deeply and be present, like still water. When it stills, it slows down, stops moving, you can see through it deeply. The mind is like that. If you're simple with it and you slow it down and you're not like just agitating it unnecessarily, you're grave, you can actually go deeper. Self-control is another item. Practicing self-control and purifying one's existence. So there's a lot there already. We're halfway through the chapter or more. And I'll pause here because there's a lot of stuff that I've mentioned so far. Anything that stood out that you want to explore, that's interesting, or you have questions about, or you just thought was cool? Let's take some reflections before we move on. We're good?
I want to really quick.
Yeah, go ahead, Tanya.
Purifying your existence.
That's what I was about to say, Tanya.
Is that like, don't be passive aggressive. Say what you mean what you say. Like, what do you mean by that? What does he mean by that?
Let's see what Prabhupada talks about in purport. The Sanskrit is bhava sangshutir. Okay, which is pretty much exactly purify one's existence. In the purport, Prabhupada talks about it's just to purify one's nature is to become Krishna conscious. It's actually a really good purport. I'll read the purport. This is one of the classic purports of the Bhagavad Gita, in my opinion. To make the mind austere is to detach it from sense gratification. It should be so trained that it can be always thinking of doing good for others. This is actually really practical. If you're thinking about what to do for others and how to help others, you create satisfaction in the mind, and you kind of detach it from the selfless kind of complaining mode that the selfish complaining mode it can otherwise occupy. The best training for the mind is gravity in thought. One should not deviate from Krishna consciousness and must always avoid sense gratification. To purify one's nature is to become Krishna conscious. So ultimately, Prabhupada's saying that purifying the mind means to become Krishna conscious. So literally, Krishna consciousness means to become conscious of Krishna. The mind is the major way we could do that. Is that we're thinking of Krishna, able to remember him. So I would break down that way, that, Prabhupada is indicating for us that as far as the mind is concerned, the ultimate form of purification is that we're actually aware of our relationship with Krishna. We can remember him. That constitutes ultimate purity of the mind. I'll read the rest of the purport too. Satisfaction of the mind can be obtained only by taking the mind away from the thoughts of sense enjoyment. The more we think of sense enjoyment, the more the mind becomes dissatisfied. In the present age, we unnecessarily engage the mind in so many different ways for sense gratification, and so there is no possibility of the mind's becoming satisfied. The best course is to divert the mind to the Vedic literature, which is full of satisfying stories, as in the Puranas and the Mahabharata. One can take advantage of this knowledge and thus become purified. The mind should be devoid of duplicity, and one should think of the welfare of all. Duplicity means that there's a difference between your outside and your inside. When you're devoid of duplicity, then your outside is the same as your inside. You're not putting on a show. There's no politics with you, right? It takes effort to do that, and it's not really pure. So that's a function, is that you can actually be straightforward and in integrity with yourself, that your best hopes and your ideals are what you try to live in your life. And if you fall short of that, you can be honest about it instead of trying to put on a show and like deflect to other people and say you're the problem, or like lie about your own shortcomings. Just the straightforwardness to admit where you're at is a kind of purity. Because then, what you want and what you're trying to do line up to the same thing. Otherwise, there's this disharmony Prabhupada's talking about here. Silence means that one is always thinking of self-realization. The person in Krishna consciousness observes perfect silence in this sense. Control of the mind means detaching the mind from sense enjoyment. One should be straightforward in their dealings and thereby purify their existence. All these qualities together constitute austerity in mental activities. That's a good one. One should be straightforward in their dealings. Again, non-duplicity, not being political, not playing manipulative kind of things. Those are some thoughts. Good question.
Thanks.
Other comments and questions on the chapter so far?
So I think it's interesting in all three of these, like the mind, the body, and speech. It's interesting, like it almost sounds like there's like just this power of pause, right? If we're eating, taking that pause, not only to say like, oh, am I actually hungry? Is this going to be nurturing to my body? Is this going to, take care of this temple that my soul isn't in a good way? And then pausing to offer this food to Krishna, and with speech, it's like pausing, taking that silence. Okay, is my words going to elevate, and expand the conversation or not? And also not being reactionary. And then with the body, it's, again, it's that like idea of pause. And I think that, in our society and kind of what we're battling against, that pause is not the norm. And I think, for me, that's what I'm kind of taking away from this is like, again, that intentional pause before we do anything to kind of just relate it back to Krishna. And is this, again, furthering us, and is it nurturing to us? Is it taking care of this temple? Is it taking care of this physical temple, or not? So I think that's kind of a cool way to kind of think through some of this.
Amazing. Yeah, I like that. The Power of Pause. It sounds like a best-selling book in the making. Power of Pause. Pop.
I have a program called The Power of Presence. It's called Pop.
Power of Pause. Yeah, I used to have a sticky note. I kept it next to my laptop, and another one on my, like, when I was a monk, on my cubby where I kept my, things that I owned, possessions. And it said, "Why are you doing what you are doing right now?" And so I would see it and be forced to ask myself that question. Why am I doing what I am doing right now? Not just what am I doing right now? Why am I doing it? What is my intention? Because intention is a very deep thing. And if you're honest about that question, even at least with yourself, you'd be like, oh yeah, I'm actually trying to distract myself from my purpose here. Or I'm actually trying to operate on pride or whatever. Or you could be like, I'm trying to please Krishna. Or you have some mixture of motivations, and you can see that. So pausing, if I didn't pause, I wouldn't get to ask myself that question and see. Yeah, I think definitely pausing is a function of the mode of goodness and assessing your your reasons for doing something and being present intentionally. Big word, you know, in the world now, like acting intentionally. That's a mode of goodness thing. Reacting is mode of passion. And yeah, definitely, I agree with your point that our prevailing culture right now is very rushed, very like, how can I get my conversations, my everything, my shopping, my eating over as soon as possible? And it's like you live your whole life like that, and it just got like this. You're never really present for anything, for people, for eating, for sleeping, for your family, for God, for anything. You can do that. That's certainly what we're encouraged to do with mode of passion. And even in non-spiritual circles, there's pushback. It's like, this isn't working for me. It's not creating a happy life. So, yeah. Samantha, you're muted.
Hi,
You're
am I
unmuted.
good?
You're
Sorry,
good.
my son's being noisy, but I have a question.
Go ahead.
I've been thinking about the best training for the mind is gravity and thought, and I was kind of doing a deep dive in the internet of gravity and the meaning, but then I was looking at the the words, this maunam, because I know you said gravity is considered how here.
Yeah, I was
'Cause I
talking
know it can
about
be like a depth or heaviness or like a
yeah,
gravitational pull.
grave, like sober. The word mauna,
Mm,
one of the meanings of it is silence.
mm,
The word that Prabhupada translates as gravity, the word for it in other places is translated as silence. That's why I went into like non-frivolousness, being sober. Because when you're sober, you're not like trying to fill the air with noise and like just speak for the sake of speaking. You'll choose your words carefully. If you need to speak, you'll speak, and if you don't, you won't. It's not actually being silent in the sense of not saying anything. But Prabhupada points out, what does silence mean in the spiritual context? He says, silence means that one is always thinking of self-realization. And in other words, their speech function is also in relationship to what is best for me and for everyone else in terms of Krishna and spiritual upliftment in this situation. That's ultimate silence. It's like being devoid of the need for small talk and whimsical, unnecessary speech and whimsical, unnecessary thought. And if you practice that, you develop some depth. I felt like that aspect of silence really connects with gravity, the word gravity, being grave. You know, when you hear somebody's grave, you know, you said you looked the word up, so let's look the word up here. What?
and the silence too, like the pause, power of pause,
Yeah.
trademarked by Eileen.
Extreme or alarming importance, seriousness. Not so much gravity like the force of gravity. That's a different context. More like, the dictionary says profundity, being profound, alarming importance, seriousness, solemnity of manner, being solemn. Solemn. What does solemnity mean? The state or quality being serious and dignified. Okay. So there's a kind of aspect of seriousness, of dignity, of deepness, unnecessary, cutting out unnecessary talk, being sober. Yeah, all those things. Good for the mind. Also good for the mind to loosen up sometimes. Eileen, raise her hand. Go ahead, Eileen.
I was just going to share a while ago, I had asked Srinivas a question because I was kind of like grappling with how can I have that like seriousness and that like Zen quality, but also maintain my enthusiasm because I'm an enthusiastic human, for those that know me. And so I thought his answer, I'd love to hear what your answer is, but his answer was so beautiful. And it kind of like, because I was like, I don't want to give up myself. Like I do have this like, you know, effervescence that I feel like is part of like who I am, but I also like don't want to, you know, I do want to have that seriousness and that dignity. And he said, as long as what you're doing you're doing with the full intention of offering it to Krishna, your seriousness and your enthusiasm will be in the right balance. And I just thought that was like a beautiful way to say, like, it's not that we can't be alive and happy and joyful, but then also so serious. Like, how do you marry the two? And I just thought that that was a beautiful way to explain it.
Sure. And you're asking me, it is beautiful. You're asking me how I would answer that.
Yeah.
Sure. Before I do, Kelly, can you give me my charger? Because I thought the laptop would last, but it looks like it's going to be dying at some point. I want to share a picture with you. Pull up this picture. Okay. Let's plug this charger in first, so get that done.
This side.
Yeah, we're good. This is Srila Prabhupada laughing. Look how happy he is. Share another picture with you. One second. This is Srila Prabhupada in the middle of class, laughing uproariously. Could also show you some really serious pictures of Srila Prabhupada. That's also there. The point is, everything has a context. When you develop spiritually, you don't lose your personality. In fact, my experience with very spiritually advanced people is that they're all actually very unique. They all have their own unique personality, including different kinds of humor. And they can be very serious, and they can also be very amused and amusing. But they're all excellent judges of time, place, and circumstance. When it's time to be serious, they're serious. When it's time to joke, they joke. And they're able to assess like what other people need, and they're able to assess what a situation calls for. And my sense of that, just from being around them, is that they're so tuned in to the super soul. They're so tuned in to like Krishna that they become expert at reading people and reading situations. And it's not like it's not a skill you can learn in other ways. Maybe you can to some degree, but it's the way I've experienced it is that this is simply a function of their Krishna consciousness. They are vibrant, fully formed, very diverse people with contradictions. If I pull a picture of Prabhupada like really serious, it looks like the opposite of what I just showed you. And there's that too, but there's room for that. And so I guess it's like trying to be tuned into what Krishna wants in different situations and being open to receiving that. And trusting that as we advance spiritually, we don't lose like our personality. In fact, it becomes more unique and more individual and more fully fleshed. At the stage of practice, while one is like developing spiritually, there are times when you have to practice being something you don't want to be externally. So practice means like I'm deliberately choosing something. Like sometimes you may want to make a joke, but it's not really appropriate. And if you're really serious, then maybe you have to practice lightening up and connecting with others on that level, because that's also part of spiritual culture. It's just connecting and just being human. So I guess it depends where you're at, but being okay with practicing what you have to practice, and trusting that you'll continue developing as an individual, just expressing things in different contexts. yeah. But the process works, I mean, people tell me that I'm really funny when I give these classes, and I'm really this and I'm really that. And I'm like, I don't really think those things about myself in the day-to-day, but this isn't the day-to-day. This is me talking about Krishna. And it brings out the best in me. And I've seen it in so many people. When you are in your kirtan, when you're in the kitchen for Krishna, when you're in that service mode, it brings out the best in you, including like that healthy balance of seriousness and gravity and, fun. That's also part of an appropriate human life. So if you keep Krishna in the middle, it gets a lot easier. I don't give classes about things that aren't about Krishna, but I used to, and I wasn't this engaged and this happy and this good, frankly. So that's a lesson. Yeah. Shall we continue with the chapter? I think we can finish it.
Let's do it.
Okay, let me find where we're at here. Yes.
17.
On chapter 17, verse 16. So continuing the chapter. Now, Krishna has listed these kinds of austerities of the body, mind, and speech. But he says the way you perform them can be in the modes of nature. Like these are all totally legitimate austerities, but if you perform them in different ways, they look differently. Verse 17, he says, these kinds of austerities, these threefold body, mind, and speech austerities, performed with transcendental faith by people not expecting material benefits, but who are engaged only for the sake of the Supreme. That is austerity and goodness. Austerity that's performed out of pride, for the sake of gaining honor, respect, personal worship, is said to be in the mode of passion. It is neither stable nor permanent. So if you're celibate or grave, or you respect your elders, or you recite spiritual literature just for respect or honor, that's actually the mode of passion. You're performing a legitimate austerity, but with illegitimate intention. It is neither stable nor permanent. So these kinds of things cannot last, right? If you're celibate for less than authentic reasons, you will not remain celibate. If you're simple for less than authentic reasons, you will continue to become complicated. If you try to stifle unnecessary speech artificially, you can't do it. In other words, the fruits of these things cannot last if your intention is not clean. Trying to do it for the sake of the Supreme, to purify yourself for reasons that don't have to do with material, personal, selfish gain, this is how you can actually practice these austerities in a steady way. Finally, austerities performed out of foolishness with self-torture or to destroy or injure others is said to be in the mode of ignorance. Now he gets into charity. Verse 20, charity given out of duty, without the expectation of return. Charity that's given at the proper time and place and to a worthy person is considered to be in the mode of goodness. So you have to first find somebody who's worth giving to. Prabhupada speaks a little bit, boldly, strongly in this purport that giving charity to somebody who's going to waste that, if you give charity to somebody who's going to use your money or resources to just engage in intoxicating or degrading behavior, that's a waste of the charity. You haven't found a worthy recipient or a worthy means of giving. You can give them food maybe, but you can't give them money because they're going to waste it. That's not in the mode of goodness anymore. Even if you weren't trying to gain back anything for yourself, it's out of a sense of duty. It's not a proper person. But then, there has to be this purity of I'm not doing it for personal gain. Charity performed with the expectation of some return, or with the desire for fruitive results, or in a grudging mood, is in the mode of passion. Giving grudgingly is actually not clean. Giving expecting some return, it's not 100% in the mode of goodness. It's more like an investment, which is fine, to maintain your livelihood, to maintain yourself and your family. You can make investments. It's not that it's bad to do that, but it's not actually charity anymore. and you don't get the benefits of charity. Charity performed at an impure place at an improper time to unworthy persons or without proper attention and respect is said to be the mode of ignorance. So if you give charity but without respect for the people you're giving it to, you're actually degrading your own action of charity. And the rest of the chapter deals with some rather abstract concepts around the Sanskrit words Om Tat Sat. Krishna deals with like our intention in performing purifying activities. He says in verse 24, transcendentalists undertaking performance of austerity, charity, or sacrifice in accordance with scripture begin always with Om to attain the supreme. In other words, you see with the Vedic hymns, they begin with Om, right? Even like our Om Agana Timirantasya verse begins with Om. There's so many verses that begin with Om, and the reason for that is it's actually invoking the divine. So the practical application of this is when you do any activity of sacrifice, charity, or penance, you try to do it for the purpose of attaining the supreme. It's like I'm giving in charity to serve the divine, to purify, align myself with the divine, what they want in this situation. That's why I'm doing it. Like that's the Gita I had. Why are you doing what you're doing now? You know, I can give this class out of pride. I can give it out of like, I don't know, momentum. It's like I've been giving this class for a while. Just keep doing it, whatever. I can give it as any number of reasons. But if I do it to try to serve Krishna, that's Om. That's like putting Om at the beginning of your mantra. It's like, yep, this is for you, Krishna. So we can put the Om at the beginning of our everything, our sacrifice, our charity, our austerity. Doing that reminds ourselves to, in other words, we're trying to remind ourselves to do things for that proper purpose. And then in the activity itself, while performing it, Krishna talks in the 25th verse, one should perform various kinds of sacrifice, penance, and charity with the word tat. The purpose of such transcendental activities is to get free from material entanglement. While performing the activity, you're doing it to get liberated, to get free, not to become more entangled in the world. And the last verse, Krishna says, anything done as sacrifice, charity, or penance without faith in the supreme, in other words, without any spiritual standing, is impermanent. If you do something without any spiritual connection, the results are impermanent. It is called asat and is useless both in this life and the next. Just like we heard earlier, the results of activity in the mode of passion, the austerities performed in that mode are impermanent, not stable. So it's true for everything. If you're doing something, like if you're charitable or you're like simplifying your life, you're like fasting or performing some kind of austerity or sacrificing somehow, if you're not connecting that to spiritual goals, if it's not for the pleasure of the divine, if it's for something inferior to that, you may get some result, but it's impermanent. It's not actually going to last. Just taking it full circle, because the beginning of the chapter, Arjuna said, if someone doesn't have faith in the divine, or they don't have faith in scriptural or spiritual authority or spiritual guidance, then what do? And the answer is they do something in the modes of nature, but the results are temporary. Hare Krishna. All right, that's chapter 17. Let's take any comments or questions or reflections. And somehow or other, we're going to finish chapter 18 next week. It's a long chapter. If we have time, we can start it today. Any comments, questions, reflections on the chapter that we heard, chapter 17? There's something in chat we have. Sorry, this is going to jump off. Okay. Hare Krishna. Anything from our online crew? And if not, that's okay. I'll start into chapter 18. But totally legit to take any reflections here, questions, comments. Kelly, you're good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. All right. Let's go to chapter 18 then.
736, just so you know.
Yeah. Chapter 18 is called The Perfection of Renunciation. It's the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita. And the last 30 verses have a lot of really beautiful, deep, action-packed items in there. We'll not get there today. We'll get there next week. But the chapter begins with Arjuna asking, I want to understand the purpose of renunciation and of the renounced order of life. So Krishna clarifies here, giving up activities that are based on material desire is what learned people call the renounced order of life. So sannyasa is a Sanskrit word meaning, usually it's referring to being like in a completely renounced state, like a completely celibate, completely simple monk with no items of their own. And Krishna himself is defining sannyas as giving up activities based on selfish desire. In other words, anybody in any status of life can practice this. You don't stop doing. You're asked to stop doing for inferior reasons, doing for selfish reasons. So Krishna affirms that renunciation is, he says in verse 5, acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance are not to be given up. They must be performed. Indeed, sacrifice, charity, and penance purify even the great souls. All these activities should be performed without attachment or any expectation of result. They should be performed as a matter of duty. So he talks about renunciation and different kinds of renunciation, just like food and charity, austerity can be the modes of nature, so can renunciation. So in verse 7, Krishna says, prescribed duties, the things that we're asked to do by scripture, by like our status of life, these things should never be renounced. If one gives up their prescribed duties because of illusion, such renunciation is said to be in the mode of ignorance. It's like if you sleep through your exam, you forget to pay the bills. It's a kind of renunciation. It's not really renunciation. It's just like you screwed up. It's in the mode of ignorance. So choosing not to do these things is actually not really renunciation. Choosing not to meet your responsibilities because of illusion. This is not actually spiritual activity. It's not actually uplifting. Verse 8, giving up your prescribed duties because they're troublesome or out of fear of bodily discomfort is said to be renouncing the mode of passion. Such activity never leads to the elevation of renunciation. So, for example, if somebody comes to the conclusion that money is just a problem, I'm not going to deal with it. I'm not going to deal with money. I won't own money. I won't have a job. I won't have possessions because it's too much trouble. That's actually a kind of renunciation. It's in the mode of passion. It's not actually renunciation in the mode of goodness, because you're doing it just to avoid trouble. Just doing it because it's easier. Can't shortcut it. You can't shortcut spiritual advancement. So what's in the mode of goodness? Verse 9, O Arjuna, when one performs their prescribed duty only because it ought to be done, and renounces all material association and all attachment to the fruit, the result, that renunciation is said to be in the mode of goodness. The intelligent renouncer situated in the mode of goodness, neither hating inauspicious work nor attached to auspicious work, has no doubts about work. So sometimes in the course of one's duty, one has to do something that is not very nice, displeasing. And sometimes there are aspects of it that you like more. But Krishna's saying, like, you don't neglect the parts that you don't like. And you don't dwell on the parts you do like and only do that, right? You do the work because it has to get done. Like maybe you don't like changing the diapers. Maybe the smell is a little bit objectionable, but you don't not do it. And you're not holding against them for needing to have their diaper changed. You do it anyway, even though it's not the most auspicious work. It's part of the deal, right? Verse 11, it is indeed impossible for an embodied being to give up all activities, but the person who renounces the fruits, the results of their action, is called one who is truly renounced. So again, this is echoing chapter 3, chapter 5, that real renunciation means not doing, but giving up the intentionality of I'm the enjoyer of this. The consequences are for me to. I'm the one who's supposed to profit from this situation. Giving that up is real renunciation. Anyone want to pause here for any comments or questions before we? I can continue on a little more before we end.
I feel like there's not a lot of comments or questions because it's just very practical.
It is very
You
practical,
can't
but
really...
the thing is, I think the practical stuff is the stuff you should have more questions about, because that's the stuff you can actually apply in your life. And the questions can be like, how do I apply this? Or, oh, I'm trying this and it's really interesting. Or I don't know how to try this. Or how does this work in today's world? The other stuff can feel like interesting, but it can be brain candy. Actually, everything in Bhagavad Gita is practical, but the stuff that's immediately practical, that's the stuff that should have more questions, in my opinion, because it's like, that's how you take it home, right? Like, how are you going to take home the austerities of speech, or the austerities of the body, or the austerities of the mind, right? Like, maybe that's a really good way to pause here. So I would like somebody to give me a reflection of how they're going to take back with them one austerity of the mind, body, or speech that they heard from the chapter 17 today. Anything that they thought was interesting or they want to work on, that's really practical. I think it's more valuable than me just reading some more. Plus, we're almost kind of like out of time.
Well, I mean, I had a question,
That's good.
but okay.
Go for it.
Just really thinking about how the whole idea of like, don't neglect the work you don't like to do and dwell on the work you do like to do. And I guess the question really is like, how to really embrace the work you don't like. Like, for example, before I go to India, I have to write 8 evaluations and continue to treat all my patients. So like, I can't stand writing evaluations. So like, I'm like, it's like a lot of impending work ahead of me.
Right.
And also like, I'm just like dreading it. So like, words of wisdom to like help a person who's like really working through the work they don't like to do instead of focusing on the things they do. Sure.
A few things. One, just like Krishna says in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Matra sparshas tu kaunteya, 2:14, happiness and distress come like winter and summer. For like somebody who loves skiing, the winter, this is the happiest time of the year. For like the surfer, or I mean, it gets surf anyway, the baseball player or whatever, it's like unhappy. So there's always like a season that you like and a season you don't like, but the thing is, they're always coming and going. They always like begin and then end and come again later. So if you got to sit down to do the thing you don't want to do, it just means that's where you're at in the cycle. You know, you could be like, just finish that, and it's like, it doesn't mean you're never going to do it again. So just understanding like, yep, that's where we're at right now. That's what has to get done in the moment. And there's a way in which the mind like gets hung up on, I don't want to do this thing. And it gets stuck in like, why do I have to do this thing I don't want to do? Whereas if you just do it, there's less of like, why am I doing it? This sucks so much. It's like, that's all in the mind. That doesn't exist in the real world. That's all just like our interpretation of things. So you don't have control over whether you have to do this. That you can't change. But you can change how much you complain about it. Like, remember, chapter 17 said practicing satisfaction. It's like, I'm going to practice being satisfied in the situation. I'm just going to practice that. Like, it's okay. It's all right. It's not great. I don't love it, but it's okay. I'm going to practice not complaining about it internally and like letting my inner child throw a little temper tantrum. I'm not going to go there. I'm going to be drama free around this. Another thing is, instead of thinking of like doing something because it gives you, because you get like pleasure out of it, that's how the mind is trained to think in the mode of passion. I want to do things that I get pleasure out of. Instead of doing to get, do to give. Doing to give means like, okay, I'm doing these evaluations because it gives the people I'm doing evaluations for something important for their lives. I'm doing these evaluations so I can go to India and give myself that experience, give my family the benefit of I come back with that experience, give my community the benefit of that experience, give all those things to all those people. I'm giving all that right now, beginning with this step of getting this done. Because until I do this, I can't go. Right? I'm giving. And that can go for the things you like and the things you don't like. Maybe you get a bunch of money from your job and it's like, instead of, oh, I get to do this with the money, it's like, I get to give this with the money. I get to give Krishna some food to eat. I get to give the spirit souls that I'm in charge of a home and space, and I'm giving. So transforming the I do to get into I do to give. That's a big one. So can I say anything else about that? That's all that comes right now.
What would you say? I like that. I love that. Do to give, not do to get.
Yeah.
But what about which mode? Procrastination, would that be like tamas?
Procrastination is ignorance.
Which then makes it more challenge, then puts you in a mental place to like dread it even more.
Yeah.
Because it's masic. So if it's like how to prioritize it versus procrastinate it could bring you more into
Yeah,
the
procrastination is like the idea that I'll enjoy more by not doing it.
or just putting it off.
Yeah, but then like whatever you're doing in the meantime just becomes tainted because you know in the back of your head you should be doing this thing instead. And then when you actually have to do and you have like a tenth of the time that you're supposed to, that was me, classic me in college, just like studying at the last minute, like literally the morning of every time. And it's like all the pleasure, quote unquote, I got from avoiding studying for the whole week was ruined by like 6 hours of absolute hell. You know, so you can't cheat the system. You can't game it. You know, if you're gonna have to pay that price, better to pay it up front in life.
Yeah.
Don't pay with interest. Don't pay later because it's gonna be just with interest. It's not gonna be fun. Pay the cost up front. That's the mode of goodness way.
Mhm.
Get the stuff you don't like out of the way first early, because then you can enjoy more. That's actually mode of goodness living. Just get that other stuff out of the way, have it done, bite the bullet, eat your vegetables. You pick your analogy. Then you can have your dessert, you know. Otherwise, yeah. Any more comments?
That
Questions?
smell, that was helpful.
She was nodding, so I'm assuming it's
Okay.
helpful.
Good.
Cool.
I have one, Samyaprasa, Prabhu. Yes,
Oh.
thank you. I liked, I'm not sure when it was, well, from chapter 17, just talking about practice satisfaction, and that's an austerity. I just thought that was interesting, you know, and I think that goes with being grateful for things, and just being satisfied in your own life. I just thought that was so interesting that that's an austerity.
Yeah, of the mind.
Of the mind, yeah. This is just so practical, and I like how you said, because I didn't really have a lot of questions either. I'm understanding what we're reading, sort of like Kelly said too, but how you mentioned, well, then that's just reflecting back. Then how are you going to apply this to your daily life? And sort of what I got out of it is it's just being simple, being truthful. It's just always so good. I have so many things, but I liked what Eileen said too. She said something, all of it. Maybe I'll just have to write it in my reflection because I'm not able to articulate it now at 7:50 at night, but I have a lot of notes. It was all so good, but we just have to be humble and simple in our space. And and the other big thing is Krishna has to be in the middle, like that has to be it. And yep. And the service mode. And that brings out the best of a person. I like that too. That was really good. And yeah, it's just, thank you. I just kind of rambled and didn't say too much, just read a few sentences, but it was good.
It was good. Thank you.
It was good. Thank you. All of you.
Yeah, and then the reflection on WhatsApp is a great place to kind of to find more and explore that.
I just want to add real quick, if you don't mind. I feel like I need to journal about this whole austerity of the mind and satisfaction for me. I was raised in a very negative mindset environment. I've tolerated a lot, and sometimes I go back and forth between judging whether I need to be more satisfied with things, or whether I'm complaining. Like, I don't know where the line is. And that's why I
Right.
think I feel like I need to journal on it. So I don't want to, I'm just putting it out there that
That's
and I
perfect.
found that very
Yeah, you're
interesting,
setting an
because I'm not
intention.
sure where that
Yeah.
line is of, where is that apex of the sweet spot that, okay, this is really what's happening,
Yeah. Yeah. Like sometimes the question or reflection period isn't really about like, I've got a fully crystallized realization I want to share. It's more like what you're saying, or what Noelle was saying, is that
Mhm.
there's a lot of stuff here, and I'm setting the intention and making myself accountable by saying it, out loud, that I'm going to work on this and look at it. Yeah. In terms of satisfaction, I think it's a very deep thing too. Like when you say that you came from a place of like having a unhealthy relationship with, maybe dissatisfaction. I can think of, not necessarily for you, but just in general, I've seen, victim mentality, very dissatisfied way of living. Constant need to one up other people or oneself, like never being able to be still and be present, always having to improve. It's the need for progress, that kind of like addiction to progress is a mode of passion thing. And self-pity, or yeah, there's a lot of different kinds of, not so sattvic ways of thinking and feeling.
Right, and then there's a fine line between sharing your experience, like, and complaining.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it's important to be able to share like what's happening into trusted people, right? And just like, this is what's happening for me, but not complaining about it happening. Like, this is the reality of what's happening for me, and this is, I need support or guidance, or I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to move through this, versus like ruminating in, complaining about, pointing fingers, blaming other people, right? Like there's a line between that.
Yeah. And this came up in a previous chapter, like to neglect one's own experience, to deny that it's happening or that's not important,
right,
to deny oneself, to pretend to be an illusion, to lie about it to yourself or others. That's in tamas, it's in ignorance.
Yeah.
To get stuck in it, to perseverate on it, to try to be stuck in trying to change and improve, that's in passion. And goodness means like, this is what is, and I'm owning my experience. This is what I'm feeling. And I may or may not have to do something about that. I may or may not have any agency around that right now, but this is what is happening, and I'm able to talk about it in a non-dramatic, unattached, but honest and straightforward way. That's a sattvic thing, and it leads to realizations and to growth. The other two things just lead to drama and delayed drama, into passion and ignorance.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else before we call it a night?
Amy's unmuted. Okay.
Okay, great. So we got through chapter 17 and we got to chapter 18, verse.
We went through 9.
We got through 11. Yeah, chapter 18, verse 11. So for this week, read chapter 17 and the first 11 verses of chapter 18 and more if you like, because it's a long chapter. And leave comments, at least one comment in the WhatsApp thread, some reflection from this week. And next week we have the unenviable task of somehow finishing that beautiful chapter 18 and putting a temporary close, tying a ribbon on our Bhagavad Gita. Doesn't mean we'll stop reading it. I haven't. I will never stop, Krishna willing. And neither do you. You don't have to stop, but we'll conclude for now. So thank you all. And I can't wait till next week and to hearing your comments and reflections online. Thank you to our YouTube listeners. We love you. Please comment in the WhatsApp thread, and see you next week for the last class before Kelly and I and many of the Sangha go to the Dham, to India. And stay tuned. And please give your opinions too on what you'd like for the next book.
We're thinking
What you want to explore. Many people have expressed the Nectar of Instruction as the next book, for example. Okay. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.